Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this month's episode of Action Items. I am your host, Dyci Sfregola. It is great to have you join us here this month. If it's your first time, if you are back, welcome. Very happy to have you. This is where we give you actionable takeaways related to all things digital supply chain. We try to get out of the 30,000 foot view and down to here on earth. What does digital supply chain look like for your business and you and your business and your team? So this episode is brought to you by NewGen Architects, a digital transformation consultant agency helping businesses navigate the complex world of technology and supply chain management, as well as all things operations. The NGA team of digital supply chain experts works with clients in all phases of the implementation lifecycle, from initial planning to post-implementation support. This includes things like tool selection, project and program management, and business transformation roadmaps. To learn how NGA can support your business scale, please visit newgenarchitects.com for more information and to schedule a free discovery session with a member of our team. So before we get into this month's episode, where we are going to be talking leveraging data and technology for operational resiliency and agility, we love buzzwords, but we love them more when we talk about them and they actually mean something. I want to go through a little bit of the events for this month. Summer is winding down. I know a lot of our European colleagues, August is full summer. Here in the US, we have a lot of kids who have already been in school and are now going back to school. So summer break is officially over for me. I don't know about you. If it is, where are you? Are you in the middle of summer break? Are you winding down summer break? Let us know in the comments. But summer break being over means that we're heading into fall, and fall means event and conference season is back. So the NGA team this month in August, we will be at the Atlanta Build Expo. At the end of the month, that is going to be August 30th and 31st. If you will be there, we would love to see you. If you are watching, leave a comment, let us know. Otherwise, reach out on LinkedIn. We'd love to schedule some time to meet you. Of course, what are we going to be there to talk about? Supply chain, all things industrialized construction and productization of construction, what that means for supply chain and what that means for construction companies as they get into what would be these repeatable processes. So we're really excited to be there. And then on August 18th, we will be joining the Women in Manufacturing Georgia chapter for a plant tour that I cannot remember the exact location, but we'll be doing a plant tour and a lunch, and looking very much forward to hanging out with some other women in manufacturing. I will be going myself, as well as with our intern, Christina. So looking very much forward and very excited to doing that. Another announcement, I have my copy of Tribal EFSA Digital by our friends Klaus and Michael Chato. Actually used to work with Michael Chato, one of the greatest minds that we have in digital supply chain right now. Absolutely. They did not pay me to say that. That is a honest from the heart opinion. And we're going to have Klaus on the show in October. So I'm really excited to get into the book and read it. I have a special note in here from Munich. I used to live in Munich, so I have a special place in my heart for Munich, Germany, and the English Gardens. So very excited to have him on the show in October to talk more about findings in the book and how Tribal EFSA Digital. So with that long welcome spiel, I don't think I've ever done a 5-minute intro. Let's bring up our guest, Elisha. Hello, how are you?
I'm doing well and excited. Thank you for the opportunity to be on the show this morning. And
Yes.
my kids are not yet back in school.
No, so Alessandro starts school on Tuesday, first day of school ever. So we're feeling emotions. I don't know what the emotions are, but we're feeling a lot of the emotions. And we will see how it goes. Like I don't want to get too excited about it, because what if he doesn't like school? What if it's a whole, thing and it's a big transition? But on the other side, I'm like, oh my goodness, how many hours of peace will I have to be able to just do work? So the quickest way to disappointment is to have expectations. So I'm trying to keep mine very low, so that I will be pleasantly surprised.
It's a very sage attitude going in for our first school year.
Yes. How was now, I want to say that I remembered your birthday being August 8th. Did I?
August 18th, actually.
August 18th. Okay, I remember that was an 8. Okay, so next week, do you have something fun planned?
I will be speaking at a Women in Technology conference. So yes, of course.
Of course you will be.
But you will also be at a Women in Supply Chain Operations and Manufacturing conference. So I think it's a great day to showcase women in supply chain.
Absolutely. So let's get started. And let me just see here. Do we have we have Rob, who we love. Rob is a regular, always comes. And then Gil, this is Gil's first episode, at least that I've seen him say hello to everyone. Gil is actually a new member of our team. He's going to be helping me execute on some of our digital transformation coaching and training services for manufacturers. So we've gotten really, really good feedback about that. Gil is a manufacturing guru, so really excited to be doing that with him and to have him on the team. Last episode, we had, and the production team can see this. I can't see this right now, but the production team told me there were 60 people live last month. And you guys were super, super quiet. So join in the conversation with us. If you agree with what we're saying, tell us so we know how smart we are. If you don't agree with what we're saying, tell us. We love to engage in conversation. If you have questions, do not be shy. We will get to as many of them as we can. So if you're joining us and this is interesting to you, time is our most valuable resource. And if you are spending your finite time here with us, that means that you want to get some really good nuggets from it. So definitely make sure that you are leaving your comments and letting us know how things are going. So Elisha, give us a little bit about your background. And I am going to go ahead and let everyone know you chose this topic.
Yes.
I loved it. So, okay, let's go with it. But tell us about your background and then why you chose the topic.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have been at the intersection of supply chain and IT since 2007. I have done everything from implementation and SAP support to strategy, target operating models. Where should businesses, do their next new market? And one theme that was consistent throughout all of this is how do we make decisions? And not being able to get to understanding of each individual functions within the supply chain. How do we bring all of those pieces of information to light so we can make better decisions? And I believe after COVID that some of those pressures and the supply chain disruption brought more of that to light. And I still think even though companies understand there are technologies out there, they're really just not sure how to utilize them the best. Our phones carry thousands of pieces of data that people are utilizing all day long, but not much of that is utilized. So I'm looking forward to talking about how technology can be best suited for supply chain decision making.
Absolutely. And full disclosure, everyone, the action items are in no particular order this week. To be fully transparent, I struggled with the action items this week because you guys know what we try to do with the show is to make sure that, okay, what can you do? Today is Friday. Think about it over the weekend. What can you do on Monday to start moving forward? So we don't tell people create an S&OP process. Thank you, Dyci. I will do that with my entire team tomorrow. Those aren't the types of things that we want to talk about. I'm going to talk about things that you can actually get done. So when I was thinking through, my experience, Elisha's experience, the things that we've talked about, I really struggled to nail down in a nice written banner way, and that it scrolls across the screen on the bottom there, and that it makes sense in just a couple of words. So we have action items. We're just going to kind of throw them up. We may or may not follow them in order as we're going through the conversation. The important part is to really listen to what we're talking about and see what you can take away from that with your team. So with that said, one of the biggest things that I have, and we talked about this in the pre-show, is to create a data governance plan. Like that is something that you can just do. What data do you have? And this is very much from something that our team is living this week. We created an inventory model, an Excel inventory model, as they're getting ready to get into some automation and get things into the system. But as we know, is one of our other, action items, you can't automate something that you don't already have. So there was no baseline to really figure out what was going to be automated and what the system was going to do. So we built that out in Excel. And when we sent data requests, it was just random spreadsheets of stuff that was just like coming. Just random spreadsheets of stuff that were coming. And what were we doing? Oh, well, what does this column mean? I think that I figured out that this means finished good, but maybe not. Is this the name of a plant? Is this the name of a warehouse? Is it an abbreviation for a vendor? So when I think data governance plan, like one of the first things that you can do Monday if this does not exist. Take your spreadsheets, look at the column headers, and define them. Very, very basic. Is that a good thing? Is that a good first step when you think of data governance plan, or what do you normally follow?
Yes, I work with mostly large enterprise companies, and I know that we kind of intersect in mid-size, but you also work below. But everyone has a different meaning of what is a sale, or what is a geography, or what does this metric mean based on the data that's coming in there. So one of the easiest ways to do that is work together to define, what does a sale mean? What does a finished good mean? When does it become that? So everyone has clear understanding of what the data means when it shows up in a dashboard. So if you would take the spreadsheets that you have right now, in the case that they are, without a governance structure or a data pipeline, and throw them in a visualization tool, it would tell you nothing.
Exactly. even just your spreadsheets, if you did not put them in a tool, what does it really tell you?
They wouldn't tell you anything, because there's no meaning behind them, there's no definition behind them. So getting your data organized in a way that it makes sense, and then communicating out which each data set means, is the first step to being able to use the data. Without that sort of structure, it's just, handwritten.
It's just numbers and letters.
Yeah.
It's just numbers and letters.
Yep.
So I was talking to the team member that we were working with this on, because we also have to start doing training documentation for it. And when I started to write down, I said, okay, well, I'm going to start doing all these things. And I was like, wait, I don't remember the workflow.
Yes.
But okay, cool. We have this data now, but what am I using and when am I using it? Because I can be thinking, to your point, everyone has the different version of when something is a sale, when something is this thing, when something is that thing. And I think that what I have learned is that I did my CSCP certification, and they told me, oh, this is your frozen slushy zone. This is the liquid zone. These are all of these terms. And then I get into, the real world, and every single organization uses them in some sort of different way. So conceptually, yes, we all know what these things are, but in practice within every company, it's different. Yeah. So when I started to write down, I sat down and I said, oh no, I need to get on the phone with the client, because what I'm thinking based off of what we built out, that doesn't mean that that's necessarily how they're going to be using it. Yeah. I think that makes sense, what I'm building, but let me get a sanity check, because what's the workflow? So it's not even just the data, but at what point, back to your point of using data for decision making. Okay, cool. You have this information, but what are you actually doing with it?
Yeah. Yeah, I think, especially in supply chain, there are so many opportunities for data collection, IoT sensors on the manufacturing floor, for example. But if we don't understand the process and when that data becomes available, we can't necessarily understand when to utilize it. And we definitely can't understand, even without data input anywhere, we can't make any decisions unless we know what the actual process that's followed. Now, people will tell me I have workflows and I have, desktop guys and all of those things. But then when you walk down onto the floor, that is not what is actually happening. Somebody's figured out a better, faster way to do something, and circumventing some of that desktop procedure. And I think you really need to understand how the data comes into the workflow to understand where you can automate a process, and even to start to prioritize that. If we think about, for example, maybe I want to start automating somewhere. Let's just start there. All of my purchase orders right now are manual. If we wanted to put a barometer on that, manual purchase orders are about $17 a cost to get them into a system. But
take a note.
Yeah.
Anyone who is trying to come up with a business case.
Yes, that's right.
$17 is your baseline. $17 per PO. Multiply that by the number of POs.
Yes.
If you don't take anything else away today, that is how much it's costing your company to run manual POs.
Yes, definitely. But we have to understand when this data, so that data would not become available until it's entered into the system, right? So we're just looking at ways, how does the data flow? How do the actual processes flow? And where does it make sense to automate? You could put something in there like a digital worker to read the PO when it comes in as a PDF, not adding much overhead, but saving some, getting your ROI back. But you have to, like you said, make the justification, the business case. So we have to understand the overall process workflow for every function in our supply chain, which, spoiler alert, it's like the entire company. And then
spoiler alert, it's the entire company. It's not just production. It's not just transportation and warehouse. It's literally, if you go through everything that touches supply chain, it's accounting, it's finance, you need marketing data, you need sales data, you literally need every HR, headcount, like everything.
Yes. Yeah. So to bring that, we can bring this back full circle. Like, how does your production maintenance downtime affect your customer experience? We could, but we can't do all of that without understanding how does data get into the pipeline and how does the workflow happen across our company and organization? Because that's when the data sharing happens, and that's when it can be used for data decision making. And you need that foundation in place to say, okay, well, we've noticed this is a bottleneck, or this is, costing us whatever. Let's see what portions can we then automate. So it's bringing that into the system and from everywhere, really.
Absolutely. So I have a couple of things going in my mind. The first thing, before I forget it, just because it's very relevant to what we just talked about and how every company has something different, is that I completely forgot about this until you just mentioned it. So a week ago, last Friday, a friend of mine in the construction space, he works at a big, huge national construction company, and he said, we're making these pods, we're making these bathroom pods, and I don't want to mess up the Skew nomenclature. Like, is there a standard for Skew nomenclature? And I said, something that makes sense that you can document and say, this abbreviation means this thing. This final part number is created by this and this and this. Because when you get to the point to where you want to automate that, and someone's not manually going into the item master and creating a SKU, you have to be able to tell the system what the logic is. Yeah. So make it whatever you want to make it, as long as it makes sense, and as long as you can document what you have done, and then a system can automate in the future. And he was like, there's no like standard, your SKU is this. And I was like, if only there was. It would make everyone's lives easier
Right.
because I mean you learn so much, in one company, and then you learn how they do it, and you go to another company. It's like, oh well, that doesn't mean that here. It means something else. So just like the learning curve that we have as supply chain professionals of like
Oh,
going to different organizations and just relearning what the Skew nomenclature is. I said, if only there was some sort of standard.
right. And then you throw in the other things, right? Like this cup, if it was it's a vendor SKU number and then a customer SKU number.
Yes, yes.
Various stuff for, make sure that
Absolutely. So again, since our action items aren't in any order, one of the things that Nicole, you can go ahead and throw up the second one. Maybe it is my idea, maybe it's not. But what do we use data to create an automation plan? So I remember what I was thinking with this, and this is kind of aligned with what I was going to ask you, Elisha, is we are talking about data in general. PO, manual POs, automating POs, that was a good example. But when it comes to what to automate and what data do we need, do you normally go with, well, what data do you already have? And then you start from there? Or do you, this is the data that we have, what can we do with it? Or do you say, this is what we want to do. Do we have this data to make it happen? And then if not, let's go get other stuff.
Personally, I start with the latter. Okay. My stance is, or mental model is not to create work just to create work. If there is a need or a desire to problem solve for a particular challenge, that's where I would start. And I would say, okay, we know that we have, a simple example, let's do purchase orders. We could have intercompany purchase orders that actually don't work. I worked with a company at one time that they were sending intercompany purchase orders, and 50% of the intercompany orders were getting stopped for erroneous data, right? Mm-hmm. So that is a challenge that I would start with and say, well, why are 50%, why are thousands of POs a week getting stopped when we own the entire company? Why can we not solve this problem? So then I start investigating, well, what are the most common errors? What data are we lacking? How do we get some structure around that to ensure that going forward, we can automate all of these EDI transactions and make them actionable into POs. So I like to start with the problem and then use data and automation to solve it. Yeah. Now, sometimes it's not. Maybe it's just a process change, but I really almost always start with a problem unless there is, some sort of need where you're just trying to get some data to understand where you are. If you're starting with nothing and you just want some sort of, barometer to see where you benchmark, then maybe, but I almost always start with a problem in mind.
Okay, absolutely. Another question, which I think is also leading into an action item, because we also, in an effort to not do false advertising, the event that we would talk, the LinkedIn event post that we would talk about resiliency. Yes. And I do remember that one of the action items that we came up with, I don't know if it's the next one or if it's later down the list, but it was to determine what resiliency means for your organization. And it kind of is also, it's reminding me, I remember there was a time where we were talking about visibility, like visibility was everywhere. That was the big key, that was the big buzzword, visibility. And when you would talk to someone and say, okay, well, what does that mean for you? Is visibility, I know where my orders are? Is visibility, I know like what the production team is doing? Is it, I know where my freight is? Like it means different things. And I feel like we could say the same thing for resiliency, especially as it relates to data and technology. So what are some vision statement is the only thing that comes to mind. some vision statements or like objectives that you've heard, or like your team has worked with when companies are saying, hey, we want to use data and technology to become resilient. Like what exactly does that look like? So
for me, again, I like to look at, the bigger picture and then break it down. So if your mission statement as a company and is to make sure that your customer experience is your CSAT score, promoter score, whatever it is a certain threshold. How do you ensure that your company is resilient enough to do that? So
I have to interrupt you
go ahead.
just to make sure that everyone caught that.
Yeah.
So you specifically you went to a metric.
Yes, I did.
You didn't say like, oh, we want our customers to be happy. Like you specifically said, like, we want this metric to be improved or maintained. Like is very specific.
Yes.
And that is how you can now use the data to say, okay, we need this. Okay, that's it.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you. Sometimes it just hops right over, why I say that, right? So we start with a metric. And so how do we then break that down to how are we going to then fulfill that metric, right? Mm-hmm. So if another metric is, okay, well, we're going to break that down and make sure that our on time and full rate is X number. So how do we then monitor what our on time and full rate is, then getting all of that data into the pipeline? So the resiliency, like you said, means different things to different companies, but I like to start with, well, what are your end goals? And then break them down into different goals, either by function or overall, so that we can create that plan to say, well, resiliency means that we are servicing 98% of our customers, despite what our internal disruptions might be. Mm-hmm. So what do we need to do from there? Is it this amount of inventory? Is it this relationship with our vendors and suppliers to gain visibility ahead of time? Is it that we have, similar parts that we could, repurpose? I like to begin with, what is the objective, and then how do we break those down into tangible parts to become resilient to fulfill those objectives?
Yes, I love that example. Like I don't know, maybe I will make a clip of that example and just run it on loop, like for the rest of our ads all the time for forever. Which we don't do ads, but one day when we do ads, we'll talk about that. No, I love that. And I mean, that's even a learning point for me, that like a nugget for me that I will take away, is because when when I personally talk to people, I very often say, like, what are your goals? And it's, we want to be profitable, or we want to improve the way we do this thing, or we want to increase revenue or something like that. But in my effort to get them to articulate what you just said, you have to ask the right question in order to get the right answer. So that is something that I will personally take away and say, but okay, what does that look like? How do you think you can become more profitable? Well, we can serve customers faster or serve more customers, because we are able to do these things, which is very specifically related to X metric, intermetric here. What about when companies don't have any metrics that they're really tracking? How do you break that? Now, I'm thinking specifically, I remember working with one of our very first customers, excuse me, when I opened the company. And I remember asking the VP of supply chain, what metrics are you guys tracking? And in my mind, I'm thinking inventory turns, or, inventory value, inventory levels, freight costs, how much expedited freight costs do you have? Because that's normally a telltale sign of poor planning, that, we're expediting everything because no one planned for when things would actually ship out and when we would need them. And he said, we don't have any metrics. And I at the time I was thinking, like, okay, none, like zero, like none at all. Right. And talking more, the CFO, they were tracking gross margin.
Okay.
Like that's something, that's something to start with. What would you, and not to put you on the spot, but what would you have done in that case?
I think, so I am data driven, but what I would likely do is take the footprint of that company and then look for benchmarking from other companies of what they're tracking to look at their business health. And I will call it business health because that's kind of a pulse check to say, well, how are we doing? And then going into their data and trying to find out what are some of those metrics that can indicate whether the business health is green or red. For example, how much are we spending on expedited shipment? how much customers, canceled their POs because they weren't delivered in time. So really looking to see what we can glean from those, but also get a benchmark from a similar footprint company to start those dialogues of, here's the realm of possibility of all the things that we can track. These are all not relevant for your company, but let's focus on what is important to you to drive your business and your growth strategy. What do you want to focus on? Is that profitability? Is that long-term employee retention? So what are those things that are driving your business model that we can put into a plan for you?
Absolutely. We'll take a quick moment just to say hi. I saw Nicole flash a couple of comments on the screen. Mahmoud, thank you for joining from Egypt. Happy evening, I think. Is it already evening there or still kind of afternoon, 10:30 counting? Yes, early evening. So thanks for joining on this Friday evening. My man, Matt Fain, happy Friday from Pop Capacity. Thank you so much for joining and spending a little bit of time here with us. Larry says metrics are so nuanced as you don't want too many that it's overwhelming and too few that there's not enough. Right sizing is a thing. And I think that is absolutely true, which is exactly why we talked about, what is the end goal that you are actually looking for? What does resiliency mean to you? Which of those metrics would you like to track? And then figure out what the data is that you need to track those metrics and to tell the story related to those metrics, as opposed to just like all of the possible metrics ever. which I have also been involved in a project, which is, can you add this metric? Can you add this metric? And I was like, but doesn't that tell you the same thing as the other thing that you already have? Yeah, well, someone requested it. Okay.
Yeah, that's Larry, I wholeheartedly agree with your statement that they're nuanced and they can be everywhere. And I'm very cognizant that metrics and tracking also drive behavior. So we want to make sure that we have the right metrics in line and that it fits for the business process. Right?
Mm-hmm.
You can't have sales with one metric that are all about driving, and then not the metrics for production don't match up and marry. So you've got to be really conscious of what metrics.
We have a question from Karen. What do you do if the company has no metrics and are living in the past? Karen, will you give a little bit more detail as to living in the past? What exactly does that mean? What do you do if the company has no metrics? What do you want to take for that first part, Elisha, of the question?
Yeah, I think that's very similar to what I stated before. Just if they have no metrics, just kind of understanding what do a similar footprint of company do, and then also work with individual leaders of functions, because I'm sure that each leader in a function has pride and takes pride in operational efficiency in their own function, and see what is relevant and important and a priority to them, to see how we can start getting a baseline there and then understanding what metrics might be important to those individual function leaders. You also have to balance that with top down and what's important to all levels. But I think that's a good place to start, because definitely if you're leading a function area, you know what the operational processes are, and you can start to look at, hey, I've observed this behavior. Well, let's see if that's a metric that we can track and understand if you're reaching your goal or not reaching your goal.
Right. I like what you said about identifying the metrics that are important for different business leaders, because I have two questions, and Karen did say that living in the past is what she's saying is resistant to change. And one of the things that I thought about specifically whenever we talk about resistance to change, it's almost always what's in it for me. If someone understands what is the individual benefit of why they should start doing this thing, that's half the battle. It's just communicating that and telling that story. So I love that you said go to each of the individual business leaders and figure out. I also have to say that I don't know any company that has no metrics. So if you are in business, the leaders are tracking something.
Yeah.
They might not have nice, pretty dashboards. They might not be sending out reports and communicating that with the rest of the organization, but someone is tracking something. You have to be making money. You are ideally profitable if you're in business. So there is some metric that is being tracked. So I think that, really starting there and figuring out what are the one or two or three metrics that leadership actually really cares about. Again, whether that at this time it was gross margin, contribution to gross margin, that's the only thing they thought about. But if you start there, you can drill down to figure out, okay, if this is what you care about, business leader, these are the other things that flow into that you need to start monitoring. And why is that important to you? Are individual bonuses tied to these things? Is it a good career move to just understand it? I mean, right now, it is a good career move to understand data. It is not this like, I have a prospect that we're kind of working through. Can she get approval for like a phone a friend kind of assistance thing every week? And I was telling her, data science is not this like, you must know about algorithms and like you must have taken like algebra 2 in school and like the highest level of math and know how to code machine learning, algorithms.
Oh.
That like there are parts, data science is also very much just like being able to communicate what metrics matter, what data matters, how you pull it together to tell a story. How do we take these 15 spreadsheets that we were just sent and make that make sense? So there are different levels of it. I opened us also up to questions early on, and now I'm looking at the time and I'm like, oh, okay.
I do want to just, what do people say? I really don't like the saying, but double click on the storytelling portion of that. The ability to communicate what the data is saying in a way that matters to those stakeholders is one of the biggest skill sets that I see that's missing, but also that is like super undervalued, right? Because you could have a whole marketing team and then they're requesting all of this data and then maybe they don't even use it because it wasn't communicated in a way that made the most sense to them. So the ability to bridge process and subject matter expertise to what the data is saying is just invaluable.
Yes. And I see Nicole proactively has put up the next action item. Checking the time. She's already put that up, which I feel good about this action item because we've kind of already touched on it, in defining the goal of the data and the technology. Like, what is that actually providing to you? We talked about that. And when I, said almost what does resiliency look like? Well, exactly which metrics are we trying to track? And that's one thing that I try to, or not try to, we always do this mental exercise of, someone says, oh, I need to implement a system. Well, why do you need to implement a system? Because like Excel doesn't do what I want it to do. Well, is that because Excel actually doesn't do what you want it to do? Or is that because you don't have the internal expertise? I know people who are like Excel gurus. They can build anything in Excel. But of course, once you get to like multiple dimensions and trying to create different scenarios. So in that case, I would think, they want to decrease the planning cycle, decrease the time of the planning cycle. And then what is ultimately the point of that? To be able, you're talking about those 98% service levels. If I don't have the right inventory in the right place at the right time, I can't achieve that service level. So I need to reduce my planning cycle and enhance it to be able to give me these insights so that I can make these inventory and purchasing decisions. So it's really about communicating that when you figure out what the goal of the data and technology is. Did I properly summarize your words?
Yes, you did.
Okay, perfect. Perfect. Okay, a couple of comments. Gil said when we were talking about, metrics, resistance to change, one of his suggestions, he always asks leaders, what's the first thing you look at when you start your day? And that's a good point. I love that, especially whenever we do like data focused projects and we're talking about BI tools and things like that. That's one of the first things that we also ask, because if you're opening and starting your day, you're probably looking at some sort of metric, even if it's not a real metric. You're checking your email or you're looking at some system to find whatever is going to set the pace for the day. So I actually love that, because what we try to do is put that all in the dashboard, which goes to Natesha's comment, managing conflicting KPIs. And he said, this is something that they experience, which is difficult and complex in a big organization. So I'm going to let you take this one, Elisha. But essentially, because it's actually a little bit easier in the small to medium businesses, because you can get, 10 to 15 stakeholders in a room to talk about cross-functional metrics versus individual business function metrics. When you're talking about complex global corporations, it's a little bit harder, significantly harder, to get all of those people on the same page. So how do you make the transition from functional KPIs to organizational KPIs?
This is a challenge, and even without so I like to akin it to this, right? We now see the rise of the chief supply chain officer. And in my view of the world, that is the person that is supposed to look across all goals and metrics to help the organization make sense and be able to clearly communicate the function of supply chain into the CEO goals, into the CIO roles, right? Because each one of those, anybody under a C has their own goals, right? Like, I don't know, CIO wants to make sure cybersecurity is okay, but then, IoT sensors you want to put in the, production facilities. So everyone has their own goals that will be conflicting. I think the best path forward is to have
an accountable, responsible, someone who actually has decision-making power.
Yes.
Yeah. To drive that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I was trying to come up with the right word for that, but somebody has to be empowered to be able to take all of those pieces of information and raise them up in a way that makes sense. I don't think that anybody in leadership role is not aware that there are conflicting priorities. What they do need to understand is what is the impact of that. So if I'm raising inventories X amount, what does that mean for my entire flow? And is it worth it? And those are the types of KPIs that need to be bubbled up when there is a conflict. So somebody that's empowered to make the decision can say, you know what, we're actually going to focus on blah, 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 because that's not supporting our ultimate goal anymore.
Exactly. It's one of those things that has to come from the top.
Yeah.
And because it's one of those cultural changes within the organization. So it has to come from the top. You have to have someone empowered and accountable. In 2 minutes, I am going to read the ending spiel. We're going to put up our last action. I think there were 5, right, Nicole? We're just going to put that up. So it's there. You can read it. And I'm going to answer a question. Can we get a recording of the session? You can get a recording of the session. This is how you can get a recording of the session. This is the end of the show. Thank you for listening and supporting our show. If today's content resonates with you and you are seeking hands-on support for your business to understand how to leverage data and technology to build more agile and resilient operations, visit newgenarchitects.com and schedule your free discovery session with a member of the team. If you want to never miss a show and catch recordings, be sure to sign up for the New Gen Architects newsletter at newgenarchitects.com. So we send these out. Today is Friday. We send out the recording via email, normally Tuesday or Wednesday the following week. You can also go to letstalksupplychain.com and sign up there for notifications for upcoming shows, as well as to see all of the recordings. There is also a YouTube playlist of action items, Let's Talk Supply Chain, of all of the past episodes, and all the recordings go there as well. So lots of different places that you can find us. And with that, I think there was one comment we didn't get to about how a company can progress if there is no matrix, how they project their progress if all stakeholders just sit around and think about their goals and define how to measure and track them. So that is the only one that we didn't get to, but thank you, Elisha, for joining. Thank you for all of your insights, and thank you everyone for the engagement. It was a great conversation, and we look forward to seeing you next month.